Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation Cracks. Roland Pierce stood at the window of his corner office, watching the Seattle skyline blur through the rain. At 45, he was a man who had built everything from nothing, a construction empire that stretched across 3 states, a reputation forged in concrete and steel. His weathered hands, scarred from his early days swinging hammers, now signed contracts worth millions. 22 years ago, he'd married Brenda Stark, a beautiful college sophomore who'd been impressed by his ambition when he was just a hungry contractor with a single crew. She'd been his anchor, his motivation to climb higher. Or so he believed. Their son Keith was graduating from Stanford with a degree in civil engineering, following in Roland's footsteps. At 21, Keith had his father's sharp mind, but his mother's softer features. Roland had poured everything into giving his son opportunities he'd never had. The graduation dinner was set for tomorrow night at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel. Brenda had insisted on inviting her brother Doug Stark, a failed businessman who'd been living off Roland's generosity for years. Doug's bitter resentment toward Roland's success was poorly hidden behind forced smiles and backhanded compliments. Roland's phone buzzed. A text from Brenda. Working late again. Don't wait up. He frowned. She'd been working late frequently at her job as a real estate agent. When he'd started Pierce Construction, Brenda had been his bookkeeper, his partner in building their future. But success had changed her. She'd grown distant, critical, embarrassed by his rough edges despite the fortune they'd built together. That evening, Roland sat alone in their mansion in Bellevue, eating takeout Chinese food. The house felt hollow, filled with expensive furniture, but empty of warmth. Keith was still in California, finishing his final exams. The silence pressed against Roland's ears like a weight. He'd worked 16-hour days for 2 decades, missing little league games and school plays, all to give his family everything. But lately, he wondered if he'd build a fortune while losing what mattered most. Roland's phone rang. Keith's name flashed on the screen. Dad, I've been working on my speech for tomorrow. I want it to be perfect. Your speech. For the dinner. Mom said I should say something to thank everyone who supported me. Roland smiled, the first genuine one in weeks. You don't need to thank anyone, son. You earned this. I know, but Keith paused. Dad, there are some things I need to say. Some truths that need to come out. What kind of truths? You'll understand tomorrow. I want you to know that no matter what happens, you're the man I want to become. Not perfect, but real. Honest. The line went quiet for a moment. Keith, I love you, Dad. Remember that tomorrow, okay? After Keith hung up, Roland stared at the phone. Something in his son's tone unsettled him, but he pushed the feeling aside, attributing it to pre-graduation nerves. Chapter 2. The Speech That Changed Everything. The Fairmont Olympics' private dining room gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Roland adjusted his tie, uncomfortable in the formal setting despite owning companies that had built half the luxury hotels in the city. He preferred job sites to banquet halls. Brenda arrived looking stunning in a black cocktail dress, her blonde hair perfectly styled. But her smile seemed forced, her eyes avoiding his. Doug Stark shuffled in behind her, already nursing a scotch despite the early hour. Keith's running a bit late, Brenda announced, checking her phone. He texted that he'd be here by 7. Roland noticed how she clutched her phone, protective and secretive. When had she become so guarded? Other guests filtered in, a few of Roland's business associates, Brenda's real estate colleagues, and some family friends. The conversation flowed around Roland, but he felt disconnected, watching his wife laugh at jokes that weren't funny and touch arms that weren't his. Keith arrived at 7 sharp, wearing a navy suit that made him look older, more serious. He hugged his father tightly. Ready for this, son? Keith's jaw was set with determination. More than ready. During dinner, Roland watched his family. Doug dominated conversation with stories about his latest failed ventures, always hinting that Roland should invest. Brenda laughed too loudly at everything, her nervous energy filling the room. As dessert was served, Keith stood up, tapping his wine glass. I'd like to say a few words. The room quieted. Keith pulled folded notes from his jacket pocket. 4 years ago, when I started college, I thought I knew what success looked like. I thought it was about money, status, impressing people. He glanced at his mother, who smiled encouragingly. But I learned something different. I learned that real success is about integrity, about being the same person whether others are watching or not. Roland felt a strange tension building in the room. Keith continued, I want to thank the person who taught me that lesson through his example, even when he didn't know anyone was watching. Dad, you built everything we have with your bare hands and honest work. Brenda's smile faltered slightly. She reached for Keith's notes. That's lovely, honey, but maybe... Keith pulled the papers away. Mom, let me finish. This next part is important. The room fell silent. Roland's hands clenched involuntarily. I also learned that the people closest to you can hurt you the deepest. That sometimes the people who benefit most from your sacrifice are the ones who respect you the least. Brenda's face went pale. Keith, what are you? 3 months ago, I came home early from school for spring break. I wanted to surprise everyone. Keith's voice remained steady, but his eyes were hard. I found Mom at our house with Gregory Blake, her real estate partner. They weren't reviewing property listings. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Roland felt the world tilt. I stood in our kitchen and listened to them plan their future together. Heard them laugh about how Dad was too focused on work to notice what was happening under his own roof. Gregory called Dad a dumb contractor who got lucky. Brenda stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Keith, stop this right now. You're embarrassing. Embarrassing who, Mom? Keith's voice cut through her protest. The way you've been embarrassing Dad for months. Doug Stark shifted uncomfortably, his face flushed. Kid, maybe family business should stay. Family business? Keith turned to his uncle with cold eyes. You mean like how you've been encouraging Mom's affair because you thought Gregory would invest in your schemes once he and Mom were together? The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Roland sat frozen, watching his life implode in real time. Keith wasn't finished. Uncle Doug, you called Dad a stupid blue-collar guy who didn't deserve what he'd built. You said Mom was smart to find someone more sophisticated. Brenda was trembling now, tears streaming down her face. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Keith folded his notes carefully. I understand that Dad worked his whole life to give us everything, and you repaid him by betraying him with someone who sees him as beneath them. Roland finally found his voice, though it came out as a whisper. How long? Keith looked at his father with sad eyes. 8 months, Dad. Maybe longer. The room had gone dead silent, except for Brenda's quiet sobbing. Roland's vision narrowed to a pinpoint. Everything he'd built, everything he believed in, reduced to ashes in his son's measured words. He stood slowly, his chair falling backward. Without looking at anyone, he walked out of the dining room, leaving behind the wreckage of his life. Chapter 3. The Reckoning Begins. Roland drove through the night, his mind a white-hot furnace of rage and calculation. He ended up at his first construction site, a small office building in Tacoma that he'd built 18 years ago. The security guard recognized him and waved him through. Standing in the shadow of concrete and steel that bore his signature, Roland felt something crystallize inside him. He'd been a fool, but he wouldn't be a victim. His phone rang constantly. Brenda, Doug, even some of the dinner guests. He ignored them all except one. Dad, Keith's voice was tentative. Are you safe? I'm at a hotel. Dad, I'm sorry I had to. Don't apologize. You did what I should have done months ago. Roland's voice was steady now, cold as winter steel. You chose a side. I won't forget that. What are you going to do? Roland stared at the building he'd created from nothing. I'm going to remind some people who they're dealing with. He hung up and made his first call to Marcus Webb, a private investigator who'd helped him with business disputes. Marcus answered on the second ring despite the late hour. Roland? What's wrong? I need to know everything about Gregory Blake. Bank records, business dealings, personal history. Everything. When you need it. Yesterday. Roland's second call was to his lawyer, Darren Page, a ruthless corporate attorney who'd helped him crush competitors in court. Darren, I need to know the exact legal requirements for divorce in Washington state. Asset protection, custody implications, everything. Jesus, Roland. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be thorough. By dawn, Roland sat in his office with a pot of black coffee and a legal pad. He'd built an empire by outworking and outthinking his competition. Now he had new opponents. Marcus arrived at 8 with a thick folder. Gregory Blake, 38, divorced, no kids. He's leveraged to the hilt. Big mortgage, car payments, credit card debt. His real estate business is struggling. He's been padding his income by skimming from client accounts. Roland studied the financial records. How much? About $60,000 over 6 months. Small amounts, easy to hide unless someone looks carefully. Who's been looking? Nobody yet. But the State Real Estate Commission does random audits. He's due for one soon. Roland smiled, but it wasn't pleasant. What else? His ex-wife filed a restraining order 2 years ago. Domestic violence charges that were dropped when she moved out of state. Send me everything. Darren arrived an hour later with divorce papers already drafted. I've structured this to protect your business assets. Pierce Construction stays yours, but she'll fight for the house, cars, personal accounts. Let her fight. How long does the process take? If contested, 6 months to a year. If she agrees to terms. She won't agree. Roland's eyes were flat and cold. She'll try to take half of everything I built. But she's about to learn something about me she should have figured out 20 years ago. What's that? I don't lose. Roland spent the morning making calls. To his foreman, Lewis Marshall, giving him temporary authority over construction sites. To his accountant, moving liquid assets to protected accounts. To his security chief, installing cameras and changing locks at all properties. At noon, Brenda finally showed up at his office. She looked haggard, her makeup smeared from crying. Roland, we need to talk. No, we don't. He didn't look up from his papers. Please. It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. His voice was conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying. You've been sleeping with Gregory Blake for 8 months. You and your brother have been planning your exit strategy. You think I'm too stupid to see it coming. Brenda sat down uninvited. I never called you stupid. No, you just laughed when Gregory did. She flinched. I made a mistake. No. Roland finally looked at her, and she recoiled for what she saw in his eyes. You made a choice. Multiple choices. Now you live with the consequences. The consequences? Roland slid the divorce papers across his desk. You have 48 hours to find a lawyer and respond to these. Everything you need to know is in there. Brenda picked up the papers with shaking hands. You can't just. I can do whatever I want. I built this life. I can tear it down just as easily. He leaned back in his chair. But before I do, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you and Gregory really are. What does that mean? Roland's smile was razor thin. You'll find out. That evening, Roland sat in his empty house, making a list. Not a grocery list or to-do list, but something far more important. A list of everyone who had betrayed him, enabled the betrayal, or would try to profit from his destruction. Brenda's name was at the top, followed by Gregory Blake and Doug Stark. But there were others, mutual friends who'd probably known about the affair, business associates who might try to take advantage of his personal turmoil, anyone who thought Roland Pierce could be counted out. They were all about to learn why he'd risen from a carpenter's helper to owning a construction empire worth $50 million. It hadn't been luck or timing. It had been because he never, ever forgot who helped him climb and who tried to push him down. Chapter 4. Foundations and Fractures. Roland's investigation into Gregory Blake's business practices bore fruit faster than expected. Marcus Webb had a contact in the State Real Estate Commission, and a few carefully placed phone calls accelerated Gregory's scheduled audit by 3 months. They'll be knocking on his door Monday morning, Marcus reported. When they find the missing client funds, it'll trigger criminal charges. How long does he have? Maybe a week to cover the gap before they notice. But he doesn't have $60,000 liquid. His credit's maxed out. Roland nodded. Phase 1 was elegant. Let Gregory destroy himself with his own greed. But it was just the beginning. Meanwhile, Roland had his accountant freeze joint accounts and transfer funds to business entities that Brenda couldn't touch. She'd be shopping for lawyers with whatever cash she had in her purse. Keith returned from California that weekend, moving into a corporate apartment Roland kept for visiting executives. Father and son sat in Roland's study, the weight of unspoken words heavy between them. "I keep thinking I should have told you sooner," Keith said. "You were protecting me. I understand that." Roland poured 2 glasses of whiskey. "But now I need to know everything. Every detail you remember." Keith's jaw tightened. "Gregory wasn't just sleeping with Mom. He was planning to steal your clients. I heard them talking about starting their own construction company once they got access to your business contacts." "Ow! Mom has copies of all your client lists, vendor contracts, everything. She's been feeding information to Gregory for months." Roland felt the familiar cold rage settle in his chest. Corporate espionage on top of adultery. What else? Uncle Doug has been gambling again. Heavy losses. That's why he's been pushing Mom toward Gregory. He owes people money and thought Gregory would help pay his debts. "How much does Doug owe?" "I heard him mention 40,000 to someone on the phone." He sounded scared. Roland filed that information away. Doug's desperation made him vulnerable, and vulnerable people made mistakes. Sunday evening, Brenda showed up at the house with her divorce attorney, a sharp-faced woman named Melanie McFarland who specialized in high-asset divorces. "Mr. Pierce, my client is willing to negotiate a reasonable settlement." "Your client gets nothing." Roland cut her off. "She violated our prenuptial agreement by committing adultery. She forfeits all claims to marital assets." McFarland smiled thinly. "Prenups can be challenged, especially 20-year-old ones. Times change, circumstances. The circumstances are that your client is a cheating whore who's been stealing from my business." Roland's crude language was calculated, designed to provoke a reaction. Brenda burst into tears. "Roland, please. Save it for someone who cares." McFarland bristled. "That language is completely inappropriate." "So, is adultery." Roland stood up. "You have 2 days to review the prenup and applicable law. After that, we settle this in court." After they left, Roland made another call to Marcus Webb. "I need surveillance on Doug Stark. Who he meets, where he goes, who he owes money to. You thinking of helping him out with his debts?" In a manner of speaking, Monday morning brought the expected chaos. Gregory Blake's real estate office was swarmed by state investigators, seizing computers and files. By noon, news of his embezzlement charges was spreading through Seattle's real estate community like wildfire. Brenda called Roland in hysterics. "They arrested Gregory. This is your doing." "Is it? I thought honest businessmen didn't get arrested for embezzlement." "You're destroying an innocent man." "Innocent?" Roland's laugh was harsh. 60,000 in stolen client funds says otherwise. "But don't worry. I'm sure you can visit him in county jail." That evening, Roland received an unexpected visitor. Sally Clay, Brenda's longtime friend and fellow real estate agent, stood nervously in his office lobby. "Roland, I need to talk to you." "About what?" "About Brenda and Gregory. There are things you don't know." Roland's interest sharpened. Sally had been Brenda's confidant for years. "What things? Can we speak privately?" They went to his office. Sally accepted a cup of coffee with shaking hands. "I tried to warn Brenda that she was making a mistake, but she wouldn't listen. She said you'd never find out because you were too busy working to notice anything." "How long have you known?" "Since it started. Maybe 10 months ago." Sally's voice was barely a whisper. "But Roland, there's something else. Something worse." "Tell me." "Brenda's been planning to leave you for over a year. She's been systematically copying your business files, taking photos of contracts, building a client database. She and Gregory weren't just having an affair. They were planning to start a competing construction company." Roland's hands clenched. "Using my clients and contacts." "Yes, and there's more. Doug's gambling debts aren't random. He's been betting on inside information about your construction projects, completion dates, cost overruns, permit delays. Someone's been feeding him information to sell to competitors." "Who?" Sally met his eyes. "Brenda." The room went silent except for the hum of air conditioning. Roland processed this new betrayal, adding it to his growing list of grievances. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Gregory's arrest changed everything. Brenda's panicking, making threats. She said if you destroy her, she'll destroy you too." She knows things about your business that could hurt you. What things? I don't know specifics, but she mentioned safety violations, unpermitted work, bribes to city officials. She's been documenting everything, building a case against you. Roland stood and walked to his window, looking out at the city he'd helped build. Sally, I want you to do something for me. What? I want you to stay close to Brenda. Let her think you're supporting her. But I need to know what she's planning, who she's talking to, what information she has. You want me to spy on my friend? I want you to choose a side. Because this is about to get much worse, and there won't be room for neutral parties. Sally stared at him for a long moment, seeing something in his expression that made her decision. What do you need me to do? Chapter 5. The Web Titans. By Tuesday, Gregory Blake was out on bail, but his business was finished. The Real Estate Commission had suspended his license pending criminal proceedings, and word of his embezzlement had spread through the industry. No reputable firm would touch him. More importantly, he was desperate for money. $60,000 to cover the stolen funds, legal fees mounting daily, and his expensive lifestyle suddenly unsustainable. Desperate men made predictable choices. Roland's phone rang at noon. Unknown number. Pierce? This is Gregory Blake. I wonder when you'd call. We need to talk. Man to man. About what? About making this situation go away. I have information you want. You have resources I need. Roland smiled. What kind of information? About your wife. About your business. Things that could hurt you if they came out wrong. Is that a threat? It's an opportunity. For both of us. Roland agreed to meet at a diner in Renton, neutral ground away from prying eyes. He arrived early, choosing a corner booth with clear sight lines. Gregory walked in 10 minutes later, looking haggard and desperate. You look like shit, Roland observed as Gregory sat down. Funny what happens when your life implodes overnight. I wouldn't know. My life's been pretty stable lately. Gregory ordered coffee with shaking hands. Look, I know you orchestrated the audit. Don't insult my intelligence by denying it. I don't deny things that are true. Fine. You want your pound of flesh, you got it. My career's over. I'm facing criminal charges, my reputation's shot. But if you think that's enough, you're wrong. Roland leaned back. What do you want? 100,000. Cash. In exchange, I disappear. No trial testimony about Brenda. No exposing your business practices. No competing construction company. My business practices? Gregory's smile was ugly. Brenda's been documenting everything for months. Safety violations, unpermitted additions, bribes to building inspectors. She's got photos, recorded conversations, copies of altered permits. Enough to bury you with the city and the feds. Roland felt a cold fury building. And if I don't pay, I go to the prosecutors with everything. Turn state's evidence in exchange for immunity. Your wife becomes a very cooperative witness against the construction company that's been cutting corners for years. Interesting theory. One problem. What's that? I don't cut corners. I don't bribe inspectors. And I don't alter permits. Roland's voice was deadly quiet. So whatever Brenda thinks she has, it's either fabricated or planted. Gregory's confidence wavered. She's got evidence. She's got bullshit. But thanks for confirming that my wife has been trying to frame me for crimes I didn't commit. That's extremely useful information. Roland stood up. Here's my counteroffer. You get nothing. You face your charges like a man. And if you or Brenda try to make false accusations against my company, I'll make your current problems look like a parking ticket. You can't just watch me. That evening, Roland met with Darren Page to discuss Gregory's blackmail attempt. If he's telling the truth about fabricated evidence, we need to get ahead of this, Darren warned. False accusations can be as damaging as real ones. Can we get a search warrant for Brenda's files? Not without probable cause. But there might be another way. What? A sting operation. Get her to admit she's fabricating evidence. Record the conversation. That would give us leverage and criminal charges against her. Roland considered this. Ow! Use someone she trusts. Someone who can get her talking. Sally Clay's face came to mind. I might have someone. Meanwhile, Marcus Webb had been busy investigating Doug Stark's gambling debts. The news wasn't good. He owes $43,000 to Eddie Torino, a loan shark who doesn't negotiate payment plans. Doug's been trying to borrow against your sister-in-law's future divorce settlement, but nobody's stupid enough to take that bet. How much time does he have? Based on Torino's reputation? Not much. Doug's already had one warning, a broken finger 2 weeks ago. Roland filed this information away. Doug's desperation was about to become very useful. Wednesday evening, Sally Clay called Brenda with a carefully rehearsed story about wanting to help. She suggested they meet for drinks to plan Brenda's legal strategy. Roland listened to the conversation through a wire Sally was wearing, courtesy of Marcus Webb surveillance equipment. I still can't believe Roland's being so vindictive, Brenda complained over her third glass of wine. After everything I've done for him, for his business. What do you mean? Sally prompted. I covered for him for years. The corner cutting, the bribes, the safety violations. I kept his secrets and protected his reputation. Are you talking about actual violations? Or some were real, some I had to create evidence for. If this goes to court, I need ammunition. Roland thinks he can steamroll me because I'm just his ignorant wife, but I documented everything. Documented how? Photos, recordings, altered paperwork. I made it look like Roland was cutting corners and bribing inspectors even when he wasn't. I needed leverage for the divorce. Sally almost choked on her drink. You fabricated evidence against your own husband? I'm not stupid, Sally. Roland built a $50 million company by being ruthless. I learned from the master. The recording was clear, incriminating, and legally admissible. Brenda had just confessed to conspiracy, evidence tampering, and fraud. Roland turned off the receiver and smiled. His wife had always underestimated him, mistaking his blue-collar background for stupidity. She was about to learn the difference between intelligence and education. But he wasn't finished with her yet. Phase 2 of his plan was just beginning, and it would require patience, precision, and a willingness to be more ruthless than anyone expected. Because Roland Pierce never forgave betrayal, and he was just getting started. Chapter 6, The Trap Springs. Thursday morning brought unexpected visitors to Roland's office. 2 FBI agents, credentials gleaming, wearing serious expressions and cheap suits. Mr. Pierce? Agent Bradley Clark, Agent Edwin Little. We'd like to ask you some questions about your business practices. Roland's secretary buzzed his lawyer immediately, but he kept his expression neutral. What kind of questions? We've received allegations about possible federal contract violations, safety regulation breaches, and bribery of public officials. I see. And who made these allegations? Agent Clark consulted his notes. We're not at liberty to say, but the informant provided substantial documentation. Darren Page arrived within minutes, and the interview was postponed until afternoon. As soon as the agents left, Roland called Marcus Webb. Brenda moved faster than expected. She's gone to the feds. With fabricated evidence? Probably, but they have to investigate once a complaint is filed. This was the moment Roland had been preparing for. He'd spent 20 years building his company by the book specifically because he'd grown up watching crooked contractors get destroyed by legal problems. Every permit was legitimate, every safety protocol followed, every penny of taxes paid. But Brenda didn't know that. She thought she was married to a man who cut corners like her father had, a small-time builder who'd lost everything to regulatory violations when Brenda was 15. At 2 p.m., Roland and Darren sat across from the FBI agents in a sterile conference room. Mr. Pierce, we need to ask about specific projects, Agent Clark began. The Meridian Office Complex, the Harbor View Apartments, the Bellevue Medical Center. Roland answered every question with documentation. Permits, inspection reports, safety certifications, financial records. Everything legitimate, everything properly filed. These reports contradict the allegations we received, Agent Little admitted after 2 hours. What allegations specifically? Darren pressed. Bribery of building inspector Kenny Ackerman, falsified safety reports, use of substandard materials on federal projects. Roland almost smiled. Kenny Ackerman was one of the most honest inspectors in the state, incorruptible and thorough. Anyone who tried to bribe him would be in federal prison. Agent Clark, I've never offered a bribe to any public official. My company's safety record is publicly available through OSHA, and our material specifications are verified by independent testing labs. Then how do you explain these photographs and recordings? They showed Roland images printed from digital files, photos of cash allegedly changing hands, documents with falsified signatures, recordings of conversations that sounded like bribery negotiations. Roland studied them carefully. Professional quality, but clearly fabricated. These are fake. Can you prove that? Can you prove they're real? Darren interjected. Chain of custody, digital forensics, verification of authenticity? The agents exchanged glances. We're still investigating. Then we're done here until you have real evidence, Darren said, standing. Outside the FBI field office, Roland made his next move. He called Kenny Ackerman directly. Kenny, it's Roland Pierce. I need to ask you something important. Has anyone approached you recently about taking bribes or falsifying inspection reports? Actually, yes. Some woman called last week asking detailed questions about our inspection procedures. Said she was writing an article about construction safety. Seemed fishy. What did you tell her? Nothing useful. But Roland, if someone's trying to frame you for bribery, you should know I keep audio recordings of all my inspections. Digital files, time-stamped, stored on secure servers. Anyone who claims I took bribes is lying. Roland smiled. I might need copies of those recordings. For you? Anything. That evening, Sally Clay made another approach to Brenda, this time suggesting they meet at Brenda's house to plan her legal strategy. Roland's surveillance team was already in position. The FBI visit spooked me, Brenda admitted as they sat in her living room. I thought they'd arrest Roland immediately, but his lawyer was too smooth. Maybe the evidence isn't as strong as you thought. It's strong enough. I spent months creating a paper trail, documenting every way Roland cuts corners. But if Roland isn't actually cutting corners, it doesn't matter. Brenda's voice turned sharp. Perception is reality in federal court. Once they start investigating, his reputation is destroyed. His business partners will run. His clients will cancel contracts. His company will implode. Even if he's innocent, especially if he's innocent. Innocent people fight back, which means years of legal bills, media attention, and corporate death by 1,000 cuts. Sally shifted uncomfortably. Brenda, what if Roland finds out you fabricated evidence? He won't. I used Gregory's connections to create the fake documents. Professional quality, untraceable to me. And Gregory's okay with this? Brenda's smile was cold. Gregory's facing 5 years in federal prison. He'll do whatever I ask if it helps his case. What Brenda didn't know was that Gregory Blake was sitting in Marcus Webb's office at that very moment, cutting a deal to save his own skin. She's completely unhinged, Gregory told Marcus. The affair was one thing, but she's talking about destroying Roland's life, taking his company, ruining his reputation. Why the change of heart? Because I'm facing real criminal charges, and she's asking me to commit more crimes to cover for her fake evidence. I may be a thief, but I'm not stupid. Marcus slid a cooperation agreement across the desk. Sign this, and the DA will recommend reduced charges. All you have to do is testify truthfully about Brenda's plans. Gregory signed without hesitation. By Friday evening, Roland had everything he needed. Recorded confessions, expert analysis proving the evidence was fabricated, witness statements from Kenny Ackerman, and Gregory Blake's cooperation. But he wasn't ready to spring the trap yet. Brenda had committed multiple felonies, but she wasn't the only target. Doug Stark had been feeding her information, profiting from insider knowledge, and using family access to gather intelligence for competitors. Roland wanted them all. Saturday morning, he made a call to Eddie Torino, the loan shark Doug owed money to. Marcus had arranged the introduction through mutual contacts in the construction industry. Mr. Torino, I understand Doug Stark owes you money. 43 grand plus interest. Why? I might be interested in purchasing his debt. You want to collect from your own brother-in-law? I want to own his debt. There's a difference. They met that afternoon at a restaurant in Georgetown. Torino was exactly what Roland expected. Expensive suit, gold jewelry, eyes like a shark. 43,000 principal, another 12 in interest and fees. 55 total. I'll pay 60,000 for the debt and your silence about the transaction. Deal. But why pay extra? Roland's smile was winter cold. Because I want Doug to know exactly who owns him now. Sunday evening, Doug Stark answered his door to find Roland standing on his porch, holding a manila envelope. We need to talk. Doug's face went pale. Roland, I can explain. Shut up and listen. Roland handed him the envelope. Open it. Inside were copies of Doug's gambling debts, now legally assigned to Roland Pierce Construction. You owe me $55,000. Payment is due immediately. I don't have that kind of money. I know, but I have a payment plan in mind. What kind of payment plan? Roland's eyes were flat and cold. The kind where you do exactly what I tell you, when I tell you, for as long as I tell you. Starting with a phone call to your sister. Doug's hand shook as he held the papers. What phone call? The one where you convince Brenda to accept my divorce settlement. $50,000 cash, the house, and joint custody of Keith. She'll never agree to that. She's planning to take half of everything. Then you'd better be very persuasive. Because if she doesn't sign those papers by Wednesday, I'm going to start collecting my debt in ways that will make Eddie Torino look like a Sunday school teacher. Doug stared at Roland with newfound terror. The mild-mannered contractor he'd dismissed as a pushover was gone. In his place stood a man capable of calculated violence. You're not who I thought you were, Doug whispered. No, Roland agreed. I'm exactly who I've always been. You just never bother to look past the work clothes and calloused hands. Roland turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Doug, if you warn Brenda about any of this, if you tell her about the debt transfer or the FBI evidence, I'll make sure you disappear completely. Permanently. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Doug Stark finally understood who he'd been gambling against. And Roland Pierce never lost. Chapter 7. The Noose Tightens. Monday morning, Doug Stark called his sister with shaking hands. Roland listened to the conversation through surveillance equipment, watching his brother-in-law's terror translate into desperate persuasion. Brenda, you need to take Roland's settlement offer. Are you insane? I'm going to get half of everything in court. No, you're not. He's got lawyers, investigators, connections you don't understand. Take the money and run. Doug, what's wrong? You sound scared. I am scared. For both of us. But Brenda was too arrogant to listen. She hung up, convinced that her fabricated evidence would destroy Roland in federal court. She was about to learn how wrong she was. Tuesday afternoon, Agent Bradley Clark called Roland personally. Mr. Pierce, we've completed our forensic analysis of the evidence provided by the informant. We need to discuss our findings. This time, the meeting was at the FBI field office in a more formal setting. Roland and Darren sat across from a full team of investigators. The photographs and recordings have been digitally manipulated, Agent Clark announced. Professional work, but detectable under forensic analysis. The documents contain forged signatures and falsified timestamps. So, my client is cleared of all allegations? Darren asked. More than that, we're treating this as a federal crime. Providing false evidence to federal agents, conspiracy to defraud, wire fraud if digital communications were involved. Agent Little leaned forward. Mr. Pierce, we believe your wife fabricated this evidence to harm you personally and professionally. We'd like your cooperation in building a case against her. Roland pretended to consider this. What kind of cooperation? Controlled contact, recorded conversations. Help us build an airtight case. I'll do whatever it takes to protect my company's reputation. What the FBI didn't know was that Roland already had everything they needed. But letting them build their own case would add federal charges to Brenda's legal problems. Wednesday morning, Brenda received a call from her divorce attorney with devastating news. The FBI cleared Roland of all allegations. Worse, they've opened a criminal investigation into who provided the false evidence. That's impossible. The evidence was solid. The evidence was fabricated, and they can prove it. Brenda, you need to tell me right now if you had anything to do with creating false documents. Brenda's silence was admission enough. Jesus Christ, do you understand what you've done? Federal charges, disbarment for me, if they think I knew, criminal conspiracy. They can't prove anything. They don't have to. They have digital forensics, witness statements, and a paper trail leading straight to you. Melanie McFarland quit as Brenda's attorney that afternoon, leaving her scrambling to find new representation. But word had spread through Seattle's legal community. Brenda Pierce was radioactive. That evening, Brenda called Roland in desperation. "We need to talk. About everything. I thought we'd said everything we needed to say. Roland, please. I made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can work things out. The only thing we need to work out is your plea bargain. Plea bargain for the federal charges you're about to face. False evidence, conspiracy, wire fraud. You're looking at 5 to 10 years. The line went quiet. Roland, I never meant. You never meant to get caught. Please, I'll sign whatever divorce settlement you want. I'll disappear, start over somewhere else. Just make this go away. I can't make federal charges disappear, but I might be willing to limit the scope of my cooperation with investigators. What do you want? Full confession, recorded statement admitting you fabricated evidence and attempted to frame me. Complete disclosure of Gregory's involvement. And you sign over all claims to marital assets. That's everything. That's what happens when you try to destroy an innocent man." Thursday morning, Brenda sat in Roland's office with a court reporter giving a full confession under oath. She admitted to fabricating evidence, bribing Gregory Blake's cooperation with promises of shared divorce proceeds, and conspiring to destroy Roland's business reputation. The recording was devastating, comprehensive, and legally binding. But Roland wasn't finished with her yet. "There's one more thing I need," he told her after the court reporter left. "What?" "Information about who helped you, who knew about the affair, who encouraged the evidence fabrication, who planned to profit from my downfall." Brenda's face went pale. "I can't." "You can and you will. Because those people are accessories to federal crimes, and I want all of them. Roland, some of these people are our friends. Our friends." Roland's laugh was harsh. "Brenda, anyone who helped you try to destroy me was never my friend. They were vultures waiting for my corpse to feed on." Over the next hour, Brenda provided names, dates, and details. Sally Clay had been secretly recording their conversations on Roland's behalf, but others hadn't been so wise. 3 of Brenda's real estate colleagues had known about the affair and encouraged the evidence fabrication. 2 of their mutual friends had been promised business opportunities once Roland's company collapsed. Roland added each name to his list, planning separate reckonings for each betrayer. Friday afternoon, he received a call from Kenny Ackerman with interesting news. "Roland, you remember that woman who called asking about inspection procedures? The one who seemed fishy. I did some checking with other inspectors. She called all of them, asking detailed questions about bribery procedures, how someone might falsify inspection reports, what documentation would be most convincing. Building a how-to manual for evidence fabrication." Exactly. But here's the interesting part. She wasn't the only one. Gregory Blake called 2 weeks earlier, asking similar questions. Roland smiled. Gregory's cooperation with federal investigators was about to become much less valuable. His participation in evidence fabrication made him a co-conspirator, not just a witness. Saturday evening, Roland met with Keith at a steakhouse in downtown Seattle. Father and son sat in a quiet corner booth, finally able to speak freely. "How do you feel about everything that's happened?" Roland asked. Keith considered the question carefully. "Angry, disappointed, but not surprised. Not surprised. Mom's been changing for years, getting more bitter, more entitled. I think she convinced herself that she deserved more than what she had. And what about me? Do I deserve what I built?" Keith met his father's eyes. "You worked for every dollar, every contract, every success. You earned everything through honest effort. What she tried to do to you was unforgivable." Roland nodded. "What happens next won't be pretty. Your mother's going to prison, Gregory's life is destroyed, your Uncle Doug is going to have some difficult years ahead." "Good," Keith said simply. "They made their choices. You might be called to testify in federal court. I'll tell the truth. All of it." Roland raised his glass. "To family. Real family." Keith clinked his glass against his father's. "To justice." But justice, Roland knew, was more than just legal consequences. Real justice was comprehensive, personal, and permanent. The legal system would handle Brenda, Gregory, and the evidence fabrication. Roland would handle everything else. Chapter 8. The Reckoning Expands. The following Monday brought a cascade of consequences that rippled through Seattle's business community like an earthquake. Federal prosecutors announced charges against Brenda Pierce, Gregory Blake, and 3 associates for conspiracy to provide false evidence to federal agents. But Roland's private justice was just beginning. His first target was Joan Macias, Brenda's real estate colleague who had known about the affair for months and actively encouraged the evidence fabrication. Joan had been promised a lucrative partnership in the construction company that Brenda and Gregory planned to start with Roland's stolen client list. Roland's approach was surgical and devastating. Through Marcus Webb's investigations, he discovered that Joan had been skimming money from her real estate clients' escrow accounts. Small amounts, carefully hidden, but totaling nearly $30,000 over 2 years. She's been floating short-term loans to herself using client funds, Marcus reported, replacing the money before closing, but it's still felony embezzlement. Roland made a single phone call to the State Real Estate Commission. Within 48 hours, Joan Macias was under investigation, her license suspended, and her career effectively over. But Roland wasn't satisfied with professional destruction. Joan had children in expensive private schools, a mortgage on a house she couldn't afford, and a lifestyle built on borrowed money. When her real estate income disappeared, the financial dominoes would fall quickly. Roland bought Joan's mortgage from her bank, then immediately called the note due. Her car loans, credit cards, and personal debts followed. Within a week, Joan Macias went from successful real estate agent to bankruptcy candidate. When she called Roland, begging for mercy, his response was ice cold. You should have thought about consequences before you tried to destroy an innocent man's life. His second target was Patrick Hayes, a general contractor who had been feeding information to Brenda about Roland's current projects. Patrick had been hoping to steal contracts once Roland's company collapsed from federal investigations. Roland's revenge was more creative. He purchased the company that supplied Patrick with construction materials, then systematically delayed deliveries, raised prices, and created supply chain problems that caused Patrick's projects to run late and over budget. Simultaneously, Roland reached out to Patrick's clients with better bids and faster completion times. Within a month, Patrick lost 3 major contracts worth over $2 million. It's like someone's sabotaging my business, Patrick complained to mutual associates, not knowing that Roland owned the very companies causing his problems. But the most satisfying target was Edwin McGee, a mutual friend who had known about Brenda's affair and actively encouraged her to take Roland for everything he's worth in the divorce. Edwin owned a small construction firm that competed directly with Roland for municipal contracts. For years, he'd been underbidding Roland by cutting safety corners and using substandard materials. Roland's revenge was poetic justice. He anonymously tipped city inspectors to Edwin's safety violations, provided documentation of substandard materials used in municipal buildings, and revealed Edwin's practice of bribing low-level city officials for inside information about upcoming contracts. Unlike the false evidence Brenda had fabricated against Roland, Edwin's violations were real and extensive. The city launched a comprehensive investigation that revealed years of corner-cutting, safety violations, and corruption. Edwin McGee lost his contractor's license, faced criminal charges for bribery, and watched his company dissolve in a storm of lawsuits from clients whose buildings failed safety inspections. Someone's got it out for me, Edwin told anyone who would listen, still not understanding that his downfall was orchestrated by the man he'd tried to help destroy. Meanwhile, Doug Stark was learning what it meant to be owned by Roland Pierce. I need you to do something for me, Roland told him during a private meeting. What? Gregory Blake's sentencing hearing is next month. I want you to provide testimony about his gambling habits, his debts, his desperation for money. I don't know anything about Gregory's gambling. You will, by the time you testify, you're going to become very familiar with his personal problems. Doug stared at Roland with growing horror. You want me to lie under oath? I want you to research Gregory Blake thoroughly and provide accurate testimony about what you discover. If your research reveals gambling problems, that's not my fault. And if I refuse? Roland's smile was thin and cold. Then I start collecting my debt in less pleasant ways. Doug spent the following weeks becoming an expert on Gregory Blake's financial destruction, gathering information that would ensure the maximum possible prison sentence. But Roland's most comprehensive revenge was reserved for the business community that had been waiting to feast on his company's corpse. When news of the federal investigation first broke, several competitors had immediately contacted Roland's clients, suggesting they might want to consider more stable contractors for future projects. Roland made a list of every company that had tried to capitalize on his apparent downfall, then systematically destroyed them. His methods varied. Sometimes he outbid them on contracts with prices so low they couldn't compete, then used his superior efficiency to stilter a profit. Sometimes he hired away their best employees with substantial salary increases. Sometimes he bought out their suppliers and created the same supply chain problems he'd used against Patrick Hayes. One competitor found himself under federal investigation for tax evasion after Roland anonymously provided documentation of unreported income. Another lost his city contracts when Roland revealed safety violations that had been overlooked for years. Roland's message was clear. Attacking Pierce Construction had consequences that extended far beyond simple business competition. By December, 6 months after Keith's graduation dinner speech, Roland's enemies were either in prison, facing criminal charges, or professionally destroyed. His business had not only survived the federal investigation, but emerged stronger, with new contracts and an enhanced reputation for integrity. But he wasn't finished yet. The most important target remained: Gregory Blake himself. Gregory's cooperation with federal prosecutors had earned him a reduced sentence recommendation, but he was still facing 3 years in federal prison. Roland intended to make sure those 3 years felt like 30. Through his connections in the construction industry, Roland knew people who knew people. Prison was full of contractors, electricians, and construction workers who had run afoul of the law. Men who understood the value of loyalty and the price of betrayal. Gregory Blake would enter prison as a marked man, surrounded by inmates who knew exactly what he'd done to Roland Pierce. His cooperation with prosecutors wouldn't protect him from the justice of men who understood that betraying a stand-up contractor was unforgivable. Roland made certain phone calls, transferred certain funds, and ensured that Gregory's prison experience would be appropriately educational. "What happens to him in there isn't my responsibility," Roland told Marcus Webb. "But I want to make sure the right people know his story." By Christmas, the transformation was complete. Roland Pierce had emerged from his wife's betrayal not as a victim, but as a force of nature. His enemies were scattered, destroyed, or imprisoned. His business was stronger than ever. His son respected him more than ever. And Brenda, awaiting sentencing in county jail, finally understood the true nature of the man she'd married and tried to destroy. She'd thought she was betraying a simple contractor who got lucky. She'd actually declared war on a force of nature who never forgot, never forgave, and never lost. Chapter 9. The Final Judgment. 6 months later, Roland Pierce stood in federal court as Brenda received her sentence. 5 years in federal prison for conspiracy, evidence tampering, and fraud. She looked small and broken in her orange jumpsuit, a far cry from the confident woman who had yanked Keith's speech notes away at that graduation dinner. Keith sat beside his father in the gallery, now 22 and working as a junior engineer at Pierce Construction. The young man had testified truthfully during the trial, describing his mother's affair and the evidence fabrication plot with clinical precision. The defendant's actions represent a fundamental breach of trust, Judge Andres Lowe declared. She not only betrayed her marriage vows, but attempted to use federal law enforcement as a weapon against an innocent man. This court finds her crimes particularly egregious, given the premeditation and scope of the conspiracy. Brenda's new attorney, a public defender named Lewis Marshall, had argued for leniency based on emotional distress and poor judgment. The judge wasn't impressed. "Mrs. Pierce, you had numerous opportunities to reconsider your actions. Instead, you escalated your criminal behavior, involving multiple co-conspirators and creating elaborate fabrications designed to destroy your husband's life and livelihood." As Brenda was led away in shackles, she caught Roland's eye one final time. He stared back with complete indifference, as if she were a stranger. Gregory Blake had been sentenced the previous month to 4 years in federal prison. Despite his cooperation with prosecutors, the judge had been influenced by testimony about his character, his gambling debts, and his willingness to fabricate evidence for personal gain. Doug Stark's testimony had been particularly damaging, describing Gregory as a desperate man willing to commit any crime for money. What the court didn't know was that Doug's research had been guided by Roland's investigators, ensuring maximum impact. Gregory's prison experience had been exactly as unpleasant as Roland intended. Within his first month, he'd been beaten twice by inmates who had connections to Seattle's construction community. The message was clear: betraying Roland Pierce had consequences that extended beyond legal proceedings. After the sentencing, Roland and Keith drove to a cemetery outside Seattle, where they stood beside a simple gravestone marked William Pierce, 1943 to 2003. "Grandpa would have been proud of how you handled this," Keith said, placing flowers on his grandfather's grave. Roland nodded. His father had been a union carpenter who'd taught him that a man's word was his bond and betrayal was unforgivable. He always said that if someone tries to destroy you, you have two choices: let them succeed or make sure they regret it forever. What about forgiveness? Forgiveness is for people who make mistakes and try to make amends. Your mother didn't make a mistake. She made a calculated decision to destroy everything I built. That's not something you forgive. That's something you punish. Keith understood. At 22, he learned hard lessons about loyalty, consequences, and the difference between justice and revenge. That evening, they returned to Roland's house, now truly his alone, after Brenda forfeited all claims in her plea agreement. Keith had moved back in after college, finding that he enjoyed working alongside his father and learning the construction business from the ground up. The house felt different now, brighter, somehow, without the underlying tension that had poisoned the atmosphere during Brenda's final years of betrayal. Roland's phone rang. Marcus Webb's name appeared on the screen. "Boss, I've got an update on the others." "Tell me." "Joan Macias filed for bankruptcy last week. Lost her house, cars, everything. She's working a retail job for minimum wage. Patrick Hayes closed his business. He's working for someone else now, hourly wages. His wife filed for divorce when the money ran out. Edwin McGee, 3 years in state prison for bribery and fraud. His company's assets were seized to pay for repairing all the municipal buildings he screwed up." Roland nodded with satisfaction. "Anyone else on the list?" "Sally Clay sends her regards. She's doing well with the real estate firm you recommended." Sally had been rewarded for her loyalty with introductions to high-end clients and exclusive listings. Her income had tripled since helping Roland expose Brenda's plans. "And Doug, still making payments on his debt to you. He's been very cooperative, very respectful. I think he finally understands who he was dealing with." Doug Stark had become a model debtor, working 2 jobs and turning over every spare dollar to Roland. More importantly, he'd become a cautionary tale in Seattle's business community about the consequences of betraying Roland Pierce. 2 years later, Roland Pierce stood in another hotel ballroom, this time watching his son Keith receive an engineering award for innovative bridge design. At 24, Keith had already made his mark in the construction industry, earning respect through talent rather than family connections. The young man's acceptance speech was brief and professional, thanking his mentors and colleagues. But when he finished, he looked directly at his father and nodded once. Roland understood. This was what real success looked like: achievement earned through honest work, respect gained through competence, and loyalty given freely rather than demanded. In the audience, Roland recognized several familiar faces: business associates, city officials, fellow contractors, men who had learned to respect Roland Pierce not just for his wealth, but for his unwavering principles and his absolute commitment to justice. Some of them had tried to take advantage of his apparent weakness during the federal investigation. They'd all learned the same lesson. Roland Pierce was not a man to be underestimated or betrayed. After the ceremony, father and son drove through the city Roland had helped build. Construction cranes bearing the Pierce Construction logo dotted the skyline, testament to a company that had not just survived betrayal, but emerged stronger. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if Mom had just been honest about the affair? Keith asked. Roland considered the question. If she'd come to me directly, admitted the truth, asked for a divorce, we probably could have worked out something reasonable. I might have been hurt, but I wouldn't have destroyed her. What made the difference? She didn't just leave me. She tried to destroy me. She fabricated evidence, involved federal agents, recruited conspirators. She turned a personal betrayal into a criminal conspiracy. And you don't forgive that. Ever. Roland's voice was flat and final. Your mother learned what happens when you mistake mercy for weakness. She thought she could manipulate me because I loved her. She was wrong. They pulled into the driveway of Roland's house, now expanded with a new wing where Keith lived independently while working for the family business. 3 generations of Pierce men had learned the same lesson. Success came through hard work, integrity, and the wisdom to distinguish between friends and enemies. That night, Roland sat in his study, reviewing contracts for next year's projects. Pierce Construction was bidding on a new federal courthouse, a project worth $50 million. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same government that had investigated him based on fabricated evidence would now pay him to build their courthouse. His phone buzzed with a text from Keith, working late again. Some things never change. Roland smiled and typed back. Good habits are worth keeping. But some things had changed. Roland no longer worked late to escape from problems at home. He worked late because he loved what he did, because building things gave his life meaning, and because success was the best revenge against everyone who had ever doubted him. Brenda would serve another 3 years in federal prison, followed by supervised probation. Gregory Blake had 2 years remaining on his sentence, assuming he survived the experience. Doug Stark would be paying off his debt for another 8 years, a constant reminder of the price of betrayal. And Roland Pierce would continue building, growing, succeeding. Not because he needed revenge anymore, but because that's who he was, a man who never backed down, never gave up, and never forgot the difference between loyalty and treachery. The graduation dinner speech that had changed everything was now just a memory. But its lesson remained. Truth has consequences, and some people learn them the hard way. Roland Pierce had built his empire with his hands, defended it with his mind, and preserved it with his unwavering commitment to justice. He never needed anyone's forgiveness, and he never granted it to those who didn't deserve it. In the end, that's what separated winners from losers. The wisdom to know when mercy was strength and when it was weakness. Roland Pierce had learned that lesson long ago, and he'd never forgotten it. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation of Lies. Tyler Brennan had built his life on 3 pillars: his construction empire, his family, and his unwavering belief that loyalty was everything. At 42, he commanded respect in the industry with his reputation for delivering impossible projects on time and under budget. His calloused hands told the story of a man who'd climbed from operating bulldozers to owning the largest construction firm in the state. Amanda Brennan, 36, had been Tyler's college sweetheart. Back then, she was studying art therapy while he pursued engineering. She'd supported him through the lean years when he was building his business from nothing, working double shifts while pregnant with their daughter Emma. Now, 12 years into marriage, she ran a successful art gallery downtown, a dream Tyler had funded once his company took off. Their daughter Emma, 10 years old, was Tyler's everything. She had her father's determined spirit and her mother's artistic eye. Emma spent most afternoons at Tyler's construction sites, wearing a tiny hard hat and asking endless questions about the machinery. She was the bridge between her parents' different worlds. The Brennan household in the affluent Oakwood neighborhood seemed perfect from the outside. Tyler had personally designed and built their home, ensuring every detail reflected their journey together. The family photos lining the hallways showed years of happiness. Camping trips, Emma's soccer games, anniversary dinners. But perfection, Tyler would soon learn, was often just an expertly crafted facade. Amanda had grown restless over the past year. The gallery had introduced her to a different crowd. Artists, collectors, people who spoke of passion and spontaneity in ways that made her question her structured life. She began staying late for exhibitions and taking weekend trips for art acquisitions. Tyler, consumed with a massive downtown renovation project, trusted his wife completely. Emma noticed the changes first. Children always do. She saw the way her mother would smile at her phone when she thought no one was looking. She noticed the new perfume, the designer clothes that seemed inappropriate for art gallery work. Most importantly, she saw the way her mother's eyes had grown distant when she looked at Tyler. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in October. Tyler was reviewing blueprints in his home office when Emma knocked on the door. "Daddy, can we talk?" Tyler looked up to see his daughter's troubled expression. She rarely looked this serious unless something was deeply wrong. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" Emma fidgeted with her hands, a habit she'd inherited from her mother. "I think Mommy has a secret." Tyler set down his pen, giving Emma his full attention. "What kind of secret?" "The kind that makes her lie about where she goes." The words hit Tyler like a physical blow, but he kept his expression neutral. Emma was intuitive beyond her years, and Tyler had learned to take her observations seriously. "Tell me more." Emma explained what she'd noticed. The hushed phone calls, the unexplained absences, the way Amanda would quickly close her laptop when Emma entered the room. It was the behavior of someone living a double life. Tyler thanked Emma for trusting him with her concerns and sent her to bed, but sleep eluded him that night. He lay beside Amanda, studying her peaceful face in the moonlight, wondering if the woman he'd loved for 15 years was capable of such deception. The next morning, Tyler made a decision that would change everything. Instead of confronting Amanda directly, he chose to investigate. If his wife was having an affair, he would know everything before making his move. Tyler Brennan had built an empire by being thorough and strategic. He would approach this potential betrayal the same way. Little did he know that his 10-year-old daughter would soon become the key to unlocking a truth that would shatter their family forever. Chapter 2. The Disappearance. The call came at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Tyler was inspecting a foundation pour when his phone rang with Amanda's ringtone. "Tyler, Emma never came home from school." Amanda's voice was tight with panic. Her teacher said she left with the other kids at dismissal, but she's not here. Tyler's blood went cold. Emma always walked the 4 blocks home with her best friend Chloe, a routine they'd followed for 2 years without incident. "I'll be right there," Tyler said, already running toward his truck. The next 6 hours blurred together in a nightmare of phone calls and search parties. Tyler organized his construction crews to canvass the neighborhood, while Amanda contacted every parent and teacher they knew. The police arrived by evening, asking questions that felt like accusations. "Has Emma been upset about anything lately?" Officer Martinez asked. "Any changes at home?" Tyler and Amanda exchanged glances. Neither mentioned Emma's recent observations about her mother's behavior. The first night was the worst. Tyler barely slept, alternating between driving the neighborhood and manning the phones. Amanda sobbed intermittently, clutching one of Emma's favorite stuffed animals. Neighbors brought food and offered support, but nothing could fill the growing void of Emma's absence. By the third day, the police had expanded their search radius. Tyler hired private investigators and offered a $50,000 reward for information. His business partners took over his projects, understanding that nothing mattered more than finding his daughter. Amanda's behavior during the search struck Tyler as odd. While he was consumed with organizing search efforts, she seemed almost detached at times, spending long periods alone in Emma's room or taking unexplained walks around the neighborhood. When Tyler suggested they check Amanda's gallery for any clues, she quickly dismissed the idea. The media attention intensified by day 5. Tyler faced cameras with red-rimmed eyes, pleading for Emma's safe return. Amanda stood beside him, but Tyler noticed she avoided looking directly into the cameras. It was a small detail, but Tyler's investigative instincts were now finely tuned. Meanwhile, Tyler's private investigators were uncovering information about Amanda's recent activities. Credit card records showed purchases at expensive restaurants she'd never mentioned. Hotel charges on days she claimed to be at gallery events. Phone records revealed extensive communication with a number registered to someone named Rick Valdez. Tyler recognized the name from Amanda's gallery events, but had never met the man. According to the investigators, Valdez was a sculptor who'd been featured in several of Amanda's recent exhibitions. He was 34, divorced, and had a reputation as a charming manipulator who targeted wealthy, married women. On day 6, Tyler made a connection that chilled him to the bone. The investigators revealed that Valdez owned a cabin in the mountains, about 2 hours from town. The same area where the police had reported unconfirmed sightings of a young girl matching Emma's description. Tyler's mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. Had Emma discovered something about her mother's affair? Had she confronted Amanda, or even threatened to tell Tyler? The thought that Amanda might have. Tyler couldn't complete the thought. As the 7th day dawned, Tyler stood in his empty kitchen, drinking coffee and staring at Emma's artwork covering the refrigerator. One drawing showed their family as stick figures, all holding hands and smiling. At the bottom, Emma had written, "The best family ever," in purple crayon. Tyler's hands trembled as he held the drawing. Whatever had happened to Emma, whoever was responsible, they would pay. Tyler Brennan didn't forgive betrayal, and he never forgot a debt owed. The sound of his doorbell ringing at 10:47 p.m. that night would mark the beginning of the end for everyone who had wronged him. Chapter 3. The Truth Revealed. Tyler rushed to the front door, his heart pounding with hope and dread. Through the peephole, he saw a small figure hunched on his porch. He threw open the door to find Emma, but she looked nothing like the confident girl who had disappeared a week ago. Emma's clothes were dirty and torn. Her hair was matted, and dark circles ringed her eyes. But it was her expression that stopped Tyler cold. She looked older, as if she'd aged years in just 7 days. Emma. Tyler dropped to his knees, pulling his daughter into his arms. She felt smaller, more fragile than he remembered. "Daddy," Emma whispered, clinging to him. "Please, don't call Mom and Grandpa, just help me." Tyler's blood chilled at her words. "Why, sweetheart? What happened? Where have you been?" Emma pulled back slightly, her young eyes filled with a pain no child should carry. "I saw them, Daddy. I saw Mommy with the bad man." "What bad man?" "Emma, you're safe now. Just tell me what happened." Emma's voice was barely audible. "The man from the gallery. Rick, I follow Mommy after school on Tuesday because I wanted to prove she was lying to you. She went to his apartment instead of work." Tyler's heart hammered against his ribs. "Go on, baby. I hid outside and saw them through the window. They were kissing and touching each other. Then they saw me." Emma's voice broke. "Rick got really angry. He said I was a little spy and that I could ruin everything. Mommy just cried and said she was sorry, but she didn't try to stop him." The words hit Tyler like physical blows. "What did he do, Emma?" "He grabbed me and put me in his car. He drove me to a cabin in the mountains. He said if I ever told anyone what I saw, he would hurt you and make sure Mommy went to jail for being a bad mother." Tyler's vision blurred with rage, but he forced himself to stay calm for Emma's sake. "How did you get away?" "He left this morning to get food. I broke a window and ran through the woods until I found a road. A nice truck driver brought me home, but I made him drop me off at the corner because I was scared Rick might be watching the house." Tyler gathered Emma closer, his mind racing. His 10-year-old daughter had been kidnapped and held for a week because she discovered her mother's affair. The betrayal ran deeper than he'd imagined. "Emma, listen to me very carefully. You're safe now, and you did nothing wrong. But we need to call the police so they can arrest Rick." Emma shook her head frantically. "No, Daddy. He said he has pictures of Mommy doing bad things. And if the police come, he'll show everyone and Mommy will go to jail and we'll lose our house and you'll hate us both." Tyler's jaw clenched. Valdez had manipulated and terrorized a child to protect his affair with Amanda. The man had crossed every line that mattered to Tyler. "Where's Mommy now?" Tyler asked. "She's at Rick's apartment. She doesn't know I escaped yet." Tyler pulled out his phone with trembling hands. "I need to call the police, Emma. Rick kidnapped you. That's a serious crime." As Tyler dialed 911, his mind was already working through the implications. Amanda's behavior during the search now made perfect sense. She'd known where Emma was, but couldn't reveal it without exposing her affair. She'd watched Tyler suffer for a week, knowing their daughter was being held captive by her lover. When the police arrived 20 minutes later, Tyler told them everything Emma had revealed. Officer Martinez took detailed notes while Emma gave her statement, her small voice growing stronger as she realized she was truly safe. "We'll arrest Valdez immediately," Martinez assured Tyler, "and we'll need to speak with your wife about her knowledge of the situation." Tyler nodded grimly. "She's at Valdez's apartment. The address is in my wife's phone records, which your department should already have." As the police car pulled away to make the arrests, Tyler knelt beside Emma again. "You were so brave, sweetheart. I'm proud of you for telling the truth." Emma looked up at him with eyes too old for her face. "Are you going to divorce Mommy?" The question pierced Tyler's heart. "I don't know yet, baby. But whatever happens between your mother and me, you'll always be safe and loved." Emma nodded solemnly. "I love you, Daddy. I'm sorry Mommy did bad things." "That's not your fault," Tyler said firmly. "None of this is your fault." But as Tyler tucked Emma into her own bed for the first time in a week, his thoughts turned dark. Amanda and Valdez had traumatized his daughter and stolen a week of his life. They would both pay for what they'd done, and Tyler would make sure the payment was far more than they could afford. Tyler Brennan had spent his entire life building things. Now, he would dedicate himself to tearing down the lives of those who had betrayed him. Chapter 4. Uncovering the Web. The arrests made the morning news. Rick Valdez was charged with kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and child endangerment. Amanda was released after questioning, her involvement deemed complicated by the district attorney. She returned home that evening, her face streaked with tears and shame. Tyler barely looked at her when she walked through the door. He was sitting at the kitchen table, Emma beside him working on homework, a deliberate tableau of normalcy that excluded Amanda entirely. "Tyler, we need to talk," Amanda said, her voice hoarse. "Not in front of Emma," Tyler replied without looking up. "Go to your sister's. We'll talk tomorrow." Amanda started to protest, but something in Tyler's tone stopped her. She grabbed a suitcase and left without another word. After Emma went to bed, Tyler called his lawyer, Dennis Morrison, a sharp-eyed attorney who'd handled Tyler's business contract for years. "I need a divorce attorney," Tyler said without preamble. "The best one you know." "What happened, Tyler?" Tyler gave Dennis the short version. When he finished, Dennis whistled low. "You need Rebecca Hamilton. She's ruthless and expensive, but she'll protect your interests. I'll set up a meeting for tomorrow." Tyler's next call was to his private investigator, Frank Rodriguez. "I want everything on both of them. Financial records, phone logs, emails, social media, employment history, everything. And I want to know exactly how long this affair has been going on." Over the next 3 days, while Amanda stayed at her sister's house, Tyler began to understand the full scope of the betrayal. Frank's investigation revealed that Amanda and Valdez had been involved for 8 months. Credit card records showed expensive dinners, hotel rooms, and jewelry purchases Tyler had never seen Amanda wear. But the most damaging discovery came from Amanda's laptop, which Tyler legally seized since it was registered to his business for tax purposes. Hidden in encrypted folders were hundreds of photos and videos Amanda had taken of their home, Tyler's private office, and even their bedroom. She'd been documenting their wealth and lifestyle for Valdez. Frank also uncovered Valdez's pattern. The sculptor specifically targeted wealthy married women, documented their assets through secret recordings and photos, then used the evidence for financial leverage. Amanda wasn't his first victim. She was his fifth. "Your wife was being played," Frank explained as they sat in Tyler's office. "But she was also an active participant. Some of these photos show her going through your filing cabinets, photographing financial documents." Tyler stared at the evidence spread across his desk. Amanda hadn't just been unfaithful. She'd been gathering intelligence on his business empire. Whether she'd done it willingly or under Valdez's manipulation didn't matter. The betrayal was complete. Rebecca Hamilton, the divorce attorney, was a steel-eyed woman in her 50s who commanded respect from the moment she walked into Tyler's office. "I've reviewed the preliminary evidence," she said, opening her briefcase. "Your wife's actions go beyond infidelity. She violated your privacy, potentially compromised your business, and failed to report a kidnapping involving your child. We can destroy her in court." "I want full custody of Emma," Tyler said. "Amanda can have supervised visitation at most. Given the circumstances, that's achievable. The question is how aggressive you want to be regarding assets." Tyler's expression hardened. "I want everything. The house, the business, the investments. She can keep her clothes and her car." "What about the gallery?" Tyler had been thinking about this. Amanda's gallery was technically her business, but Tyler had provided the initial investment and served as guarantor on the lease. "I'm calling in the loan and withdrawing my guarantee. Let her figure out how to run it without my backing." Rebecca made notes. "We'll also need to address the criminal implications. If Amanda knew Valdez had kidnapped Emma and failed to report it, she could face charges herself." Tyler had already considered this angle. "I want her to sweat about that possibility, but I won't push for charges if she cooperates with the divorce." As Rebecca packed up her papers, she gave Tyler an appraising look. "Most men in your situation want revenge, but you seem unusually methodical about this." Tyler's smile was cold. "I learned a long time ago that the best revenge isn't quick, it's thorough." That evening, Tyler sat in Emma's room as she prepared for bed. She'd been quiet since her return, processing everything that had happened. "Daddy, are you angry at me for spying on Mommy?" Tyler turned from where he'd been adjusting her bookshelf. "No, sweetheart. You were trying to protect our family. That was brave. Will Mommy come home? Not to live with us, no. But she'll always be your mother, and you'll still see her." Emma nodded slowly. "Will the bad man go to jail?" "Yes, for a very long time." "Good," Emma said with a firmness that reminded Tyler of himself. "People who hurt kids should go to jail." As Tyler tucked Emma in, he reflected on how much his daughter had grown up in just 2 weeks. She'd seen the worst of adult behavior, but had emerged with her moral compass intact. Tyler would make sure she never had to experience such betrayal again. Meanwhile, the wheels of Tyler's revenge were just beginning to turn. Chapter 5: The Setup. 2 weeks after Amanda's arrest, Tyler's plan began to take shape. He'd moved beyond anger into the cold, calculating mindset that had built his business empire. Every move was strategic, designed to achieve maximum impact. Tyler's first target was Valdez's upcoming trial. While the prosecutor was confident of conviction, Tyler wanted to ensure the sentence reflected the full scope of the crime. He hired a victim's advocate to work with Emma, not just for her emotional recovery, but to prepare the most compelling testimony possible. Frank Rodriguez had uncovered a crucial detail. Valdez had been using Amanda's gallery to launder money from his previous schemes. 3 other married women had given him loans for artwork that never existed. The FBI was now investigating Valdez for wire fraud and racketeering in addition to the kidnapping charges. Tyler arranged a meeting with FBI agent Sarah Wells, who was leading the financial crimes investigation. "Mr. Brennan, we appreciate your cooperation," Agent Wells said as they sat in Tyler's office. "Your wife's documentation of your assets helped us understand Valdez's pattern, but we need her testimony to build the strongest case." Tyler had anticipated this moment. "Agent Wells, my wife is clearly a victim of Valdez's manipulation, but she also made choices that endanger my daughter. I want assurance that her cooperation will be noted in any potential charges against her. If she provides substantial assistance, we can recommend leniency." Tyler nodded. This was exactly what he'd hoped for. Amanda would have to choose between protecting herself and protecting what remained of her reputation. Meanwhile, Tyler was methodically dismantling Amanda's life. He'd called in the loan that funded her gallery, giving her 30 days to repay $200,000 she didn't have. He'd also withdrawn his personal guarantee on the gallery's lease, meaning Amanda was now personally liable for the remaining 18 months of rent. The art world was small and gossipy. Word of Amanda's affair and the kidnapping scandal spread quickly through her professional circles. 3 major artists pulled their work from her gallery, and 2 corporate clients canceled upcoming events. Tyler's business connections proved invaluable. He owned the buildings housing 2 of the city's most prominent galleries. A quiet word from Tyler, and both owners expressed concerns about Amanda's reputation issues potentially affecting their businesses. Amanda called Tyler repeatedly, begging for a meeting. Tyler finally agreed to see her at his office, neutral territory where she couldn't claim emotional manipulation. Amanda looked haggard when she arrived. Her usually perfect appearance was disheveled, and she'd lost weight during the stress of the past month. "Tyler, please," she began before even sitting down. "I know what I did was unforgivable, but I need you to understand." Tyler held up a hand. "I understand perfectly. You had an affair, endangered our daughter, and violated our marriage in every possible way. The only question now is how cooperative you're going to be." "What do you mean?" Tyler slid a folder across his desk. "FBI agent Wells wants your testimony against Valdez. You're going to give it. You're also going to sign these divorce papers without contest." Amanda opened the folder and paled as she read. "Tyler, you're taking everything. The house, the investments, even my gallery funding. I'll have nothing. You should have thought of that before you let your lover kidnap our daughter. Emma wasn't supposed to be there." Rick panicked when he saw her. "I never wanted her involved." Tyler's voice turned deadly quiet. "But she was involved. For 7 days, my 10-year-old daughter was held captive by a man who threatened her family. For 7 days, I didn't know if she was alive or dead. And you knew where she was the entire time." Amanda's tears came freely now. "I was scared. Rick said if I told anyone, he'd release photos that would destroy both of us. I thought he'd let her go after a few days. Instead, you watched me organize search parties and offer rewards while our daughter was being terrorized by your boyfriend." Tyler's control was impressive given the rage burning inside him. "You made your choice, Amanda. Now you live with the consequences. What about Emma? She needs her mother. Emma will have supervised visitation twice a week. You'll pay child support based on your earning capacity, which should be interesting since you won't have a gallery much longer." Amanda's voice turned desperate. "Tyler, I know I made terrible mistakes, but I loved you. I loved our family. Rick manipulated me, made me think." "Stop." Tyler's word cut through her pleading. "Don't insult my intelligence with victim stories. You documented our private life for 8 months. You photographed financial records, security codes, private conversations. That wasn't manipulation. That was collaboration." Tyler stood, indicating the meeting was over. "You have 24 hours to decide. Cooperate with the FBI and sign the divorce papers, or face the consequences of not cooperating." "What consequences?" Tyler's smile was cold. "You really want to find out what happens when you refuse to help prosecute the man who kidnapped your daughter?" Amanda left his office in tears, but Tyler felt no sympathy. She'd burned their family to the ground for a relationship with a con artist. The fact that she'd been manipulated didn't excuse the choices she'd made. That evening, Tyler sat with Emma as she worked on a school project about family history. She was writing about Tyler's construction company and how he'd built it from nothing. "Daddy, my teacher says some families break apart, but the important people stay together," Emma said without looking up from her writing. "Are we going to stay together?" Tyler put his arm around his daughter. "We absolutely are. It's just going to be you and me now, kiddo." Emma smiled for the first time in weeks. "Good. I like it better this way." Tyler realized that his daughter had reached the same conclusion he had. Some betrayals were too deep to forgive, even within a family. Emma understood that her mother had chosen another man over her family's safety. At 10 years old, she was already developing the moral clarity that would protect her from future manipulation. Tyler's phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca Hamilton. Amanda's attorney called. "She's signing everything tomorrow morning." Tyler deleted the message and focused on Emma's project. Phase 1 of his plan was complete. Amanda was neutralized, Valdez would spend decades in prison, and Emma was safe. But Tyler wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. Chapter 6, Expanding the Net. Amanda signed the papers on a rainy Thursday morning. She sat across from Tyler and their attorneys, her hands shaking as she put her signature to documents that transferred most of her life to her former husband. The FBI interview is scheduled for Monday. Rebecca Hamilton informed Amanda's attorney. Your client's cooperation will be noted in our final settlement. As Amanda left the law office, Tyler felt a cold satisfaction. She'd lost her marriage, her home, her business, and her daughter's respect. But Tyler's revenge was far from complete. Frank Rodriguez had uncovered something interesting. Valdez's art studio was rented from a property management company owned by Amanda's brother, Kevin Mitchell. Kevin had known about the affair for months and had actually helped Valdez set up the kidnapping by providing a key to the studio where Amanda stored some of her gallery's inventory. Tyler's investigation revealed that Kevin had his own motivations. He'd been skimming money from the property management company's accounts and needed Valdez's scheme to succeed so he could cover the missing funds with a cut of whatever Valdez extorted from Tyler. Family corruption runs deep, Frank observed as he presented Tyler with the evidence. Kevin's been stealing from his own company for 2 years. He's desperate enough to do anything. Tyler studied the financial records spread across his desk. Kevin Mitchell owned 4 rental properties in the Arts District, including the building that housed Amanda's gallery. He also managed properties for 3 other owners, giving him access to significant cash flow. What's Kevin's exposure if this comes out? Tyler asked. Embezzlement charges, definitely. Probably fraud and conspiracy related to the kidnapping. He's looking at serious prison time. Tyler made a decision that would destroy Amanda's extended family. I want to buy Kevin's properties. All of them. Frank raised an eyebrow. He's not going to want to sell. Tyler's smile was predatory. He won't have a choice. Tyler's next move was brilliantly simple. He had Frank deliver an anonymous tip to the IRS about Kevin's property management company. Within a week, federal auditors were examining Kevin's books. The missing money was discovered immediately. Tyler then approached the owners whose properties Kevin managed. As a respected businessman, Tyler's concerns about Kevin's financial irregularities carried significant weight. All 3 owners terminated their contracts with Kevin within days. Without income from property management and facing federal investigation, Kevin was financially devastated. When Tyler's lawyer made an offer to purchase Kevin's properties at 60 cents on the dollar, Kevin was forced to accept. But Tyler wasn't finished with Kevin. Using his new ownership of the building that housed Amanda's gallery, Tyler evicted her for a breach of lease terms related to criminal activity. Amanda's art business, already struggling after losing Tyler's financial backing, was effectively finished. The ripple effects extended further. Amanda's sister, Lisa, had co-signed some of Kevin's business loans. When Kevin defaulted, Lisa's credit was destroyed. Her husband, a mid-level bank manager, faced professional consequences when his wife's financial problems came to light during his annual review. Tyler's systematic destruction of Amanda's family network was methodical and ruthless. Each member had either actively participated in the betrayal or enabled it through their silence. Emma watched some of these developments with the sharp awareness that Tyler was beginning to recognize as her defining characteristic. "Daddy, why is Uncle Kevin moving away?" she asked one evening as they worked on dinner together. "Uncle Kevin made some bad choices that hurt our family," Tyler explained. "Sometimes people have to face consequences for their actions." Emma nodded thoughtfully. Like mommy. I don't miss him," Emma said matter-of-factly. "He never liked me anyway. He always acted like I was a bother." Tyler realized that Emma had noticed Kevin's dismissive attitude toward her long before the kidnapping. Children were remarkably good at identifying people who didn't value them. Meanwhile, Valdez's trial was proceeding exactly as Tyler had hoped. Amanda's testimony was devastating, detailing how Valdez had manipulated her into documenting Tyler's assets and how he'd shown no remorse for traumatizing Emma. The prosecution presented evidence of Valdez's pattern of targeting wealthy married women, using Amanda's case as the most extreme example. The kidnapping charge elevated Valdez's crimes from con artist to predator. Tyler attended every day of the trial, sitting in the front row where Valdez could see him. He wanted the man to know that his victim's father was watching, waiting, ensuring justice was served. Emma testified via closed-circuit television, her composed recounting of her week in captivity moving several jurors to tears. Tyler was proud of his daughter's strength and clarity. She answered every question honestly, never dramatizing but never minimizing the fear she'd experienced. During cross-examination, Valdez's defense attorney tried to suggest that Emma had misunderstood what she'd seen at the apartment, that perhaps her mother and Valdez were just friends. Emma's response silenced the courtroom. "I know what kissing looks like. I know what people do when they take their clothes off together. And I know the difference between friends and people who are being bad together." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Valdez was convicted on all counts: kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, child endangerment, wire fraud, and racketeering. The judge sentenced him to 35 years in federal prison. Tyler felt a grim satisfaction as Valdez was led away in shackles. But even 35 years didn't feel like enough payment for what the man had put Emma through. As Tyler and Emma left the courthouse, reporters shouted questions about the case. Tyler ignored them all except one. "Mr. Brennan, do you feel justice was served today?" Tyler stopped and looked directly into the camera. "My daughter is safe, and the man who hurt her will never hurt another child. That's what justice looks like." That evening, Tyler and Emma celebrated with ice cream and a movie. As they sat together on their couch, in their house, the one Amanda would never return to, Tyler reflected on how much they'd both grown through this ordeal. Emma was stronger, more self-reliant, and possessed a moral clarity that would serve her well in life. She'd learned that actions have consequences and that loyalty was earned, not assumed. Tyler had learned something different, that his capacity for methodical revenge was far greater than he'd ever imagined. And he wasn't finished using it yet. Chapter 7. The Final Players. 3 months after Valdez's conviction, Tyler discovered the last piece of the betrayal puzzle. Frank Rodriguez's continued investigation revealed that Amanda's affair hadn't happened in a vacuum. Someone had introduced her to Valdez, someone who knew about Tyler's wealth and business vulnerabilities. That someone was Dr. Patricia Hoffman, Amanda's therapist. Tyler's initial reaction was disbelief. Amanda had been seeing Dr. Hoffman for anxiety and depression related to their marriage. Tyler had even paid for the sessions, believing his wife was working to improve their relationship. Instead, Dr. Hoffman had been systematically undermining the marriage while feeding information about Tyler's business to Valdez. The therapist had a gambling addiction that left her vulnerable to Valdez's financial manipulation. She violated every ethical standard in her profession, Frank explained as they reviewed recorded phone calls between Dr. Hoffman and Valdez. She shared details about your marriage, your financial situation, even Amanda's psychological vulnerabilities. Tyler stared at the evidence with cold fury. Dr. Hoffman had weaponized her professional relationship with Amanda to destroy Tyler's family. She'd used her position of trust to facilitate the affair and, ultimately, Emma's kidnapping. "What's her exposure?" Tyler asked. "Professional license revocation, certainly. Possible criminal charges for conspiracy and violation of patient confidentiality. Her malpractice insurance won't cover intentional criminal acts, so she's personally liable for any civil damages." Tyler made his decision immediately. "I want her destroyed professionally and financially." Tyler's first move was strategic. Rather than filing complaints himself, he arranged for 3 of Dr. Hoffman's other patients to discover that their confidentiality had been violated. The state medical board investigation was swift and damning. Dr. Hoffman's professional license was suspended pending a full hearing. Her practice collapsed as patients fled and colleagues distanced themselves from the scandal. The medical community was small and unforgiving when it came to ethical violations. Tyler then filed a massive civil lawsuit against Dr. Hoffman for intentional infliction of emotional distress, breach of fiduciary duty, and conspiracy. The damages sought included Tyler's legal fees, Emma's ongoing therapy costs, and punitive damages for the trauma inflicted on his family. But Tyler's most devastating move was personal. Frank's investigation revealed that Dr. Hoffman had a teenage daughter, Rachel, who was a promising art student. The girl had applied for early admission to prestigious art schools, using a portfolio that included several pieces displayed in Amanda's gallery. Tyler purchased those pieces through a proxy buyer, then had them authenticated. The authentication revealed that two of the paintings Rachel claimed as her own work were actually created by a lesser-known artist whose pieces Amanda had acquired for the gallery. The plagiarism scandal destroyed Rachel's art school prospects and led to her suspension from high school. Dr. Hoffman, already facing financial ruin from the lawsuit and loss of her practice, watched her daughter's future crumble as well. Tyler felt no sympathy. Dr. Hoffman had used her position to target his family, ultimately contributing to Emma's kidnapping. Her daughter was experiencing a fraction of the trauma Emma had endured. Emma, now 11 and increasingly perceptive, noticed the pattern of Tyler's actions. "Daddy, you're hurting everyone who hurt us, aren't you?" she asked one evening as they reviewed her homework. Tyler considered his response carefully. "I'm making sure people face consequences for their choices. When adults hurt children, especially our family, they need to understand that actions matter." Emma nodded slowly. "Good. People should protect kids, not hurt them." Tyler realized that Emma was developing the same unforgiving moral code that drove him. She understood that some betrayals were too deep to overlook, that forgiveness without consequences was just enabling further harm. Amanda, meanwhile, was struggling to rebuild her life. Without the gallery, without Tyler's financial support, and with limited visitation rights to Emma, she'd moved to a small apartment across town and taken a job at a chain art supply store. During one of her supervised visits with Emma, Amanda tried to explain her actions. "I made terrible mistakes," Amanda told their daughter. "I hope someday you can forgive me." Emma's response was devastating in its simplicity. "Daddy says forgiveness is for people who are sorry and try to make things better. You're just sorry you got caught." Tyler, watching from across the room, felt proud of Emma's clarity. His daughter understood the difference between genuine remorse and self-pity. Amanda's face crumpled, but Emma continued with the brutal honesty of childhood. "You let the bad man take me because you cared more about keeping your boyfriend than keeping me safe. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." After Amanda left that day, Tyler knelt beside Emma. "That was hard to say to your mother, but it was true, wasn't it?" "Yes, it was true." Emma leaned against Tyler's shoulder. "I don't want to see her anymore. She makes me feel sad and angry." Tyler made a mental note to discuss modifying the visitation schedule with Rebecca. Emma was old enough to have her preferences considered by the court, and she'd clearly made her decision about her relationship with her mother. As Tyler tucked Emma into bed that night, she asked a question that showed how much she'd grown through their ordeal. "Daddy, when I'm older, how will I know if someone really loves me or if they're just pretending?" Tyler thought carefully before answering. Real love means putting the other person's safety and happiness before your own wants. People who really love you will protect you, even when it's hard or costs them something. Emma smiled. "Like how you protected me. Like how we protected each other," Tyler corrected. "You were brave enough to tell me the truth, even when it was scary." As Emma drifted off to sleep, Tyler reflected on the lessons they'd both learned. Trust had to be earned. Loyalty was precious because it was rare, and some betrayals were so fundamental that forgiveness became impossible. Tyler's war against those who had betrayed his family was nearly complete, but he had one final move to make, one that would ensure Emma's future security while sending a clear message about the price of crossing the Brennan family. Chapter 8: Total Victory. 1 year after Emma's kidnapping, Tyler stood in his office reviewing the final reports from Frank Rodriguez. Every person who had betrayed or endangered his family had been systematically destroyed. Valdez was serving his 35-year sentence in a federal penitentiary, where Tyler's connections had ensured he was housed with inmates who had strong feelings about people who hurt children. Amanda was working retail, living in a studio apartment, and had voluntarily terminated her parental rights after Emma refused to see her for 6 months. The court had agreed to Emma's wishes, and Amanda was now legally nothing more than a biological donor to Tyler's daughter. Kevin Mitchell had fled the state after his embezzlement conviction, leaving behind a destroyed credit rating and a reputation that would follow him anywhere in the construction or property management industry. Dr. Hoffman had lost her medical license permanently and was facing personal bankruptcy. Her daughter Rachel had been forced to repeat her senior year of high school and was working part-time to help pay the family's legal bills. But Tyler's most devastating victory was still to come. Frank's investigation had uncovered one final piece of the puzzle. The original introduction between Amanda and Valdez hadn't been accidental. It had been orchestrated by Amanda's college roommate, Monica Reeves, who worked as a coordinator for high-end art events. Monica had connected Amanda and Valdez deliberately, knowing about the sculptor's pattern of targeting wealthy married women. Monica received a finder's fee for each successful mark she delivered to Valdez's schemes. Tyler's discovery of Monica's role had taken months of investigation, tracing financial transfers and communication records. When he finally had the proof, Tyler's response was swift and total. Monica worked for an event planning company that frequently coordinated gallery openings and art auctions. Tyler owned the venues for 60% of the company's annual events. One conversation with the company's owner about Monica's reliability issues was enough to end her career in event planning. Tyler then used his influence with the city's Arts Council to ensure Monica was blacklisted from cultural events throughout the region. Her specialty was connecting artists with wealthy collectors, a role that became impossible when no venue would work with her. But Tyler's final move against Monica was personal. Frank's investigation revealed that Monica's teenage son had been accepted to a prestigious private school with a substantial scholarship. The scholarship was funded by a foundation that Tyler's company had donated to for years. Tyler made a single phone call. Monica's son lost his scholarship and was forced to transfer to public school. When Monica called Tyler directly to beg for reconsideration, Tyler's response was cold and final. "You delivered my wife to a predator who kidnapped my daughter. Your son's education is the least of what you'll lose if you ever cross my family again." Monica moved out of state within a month, taking her son to start over in a place where Tyler's influence couldn't reach. As Tyler reviewed the complete destruction of everyone who had wronged his family, he felt a satisfaction deeper than anything his business success had ever provided. These people had threatened the most important thing in his world, Emma's safety and well-being. Their punishment had been total and permanent. Emma, now 12, had grown into a confident, intelligent young woman who shared Tyler's uncompromising sense of justice. She excelled in school, played competitive soccer, and had developed an interest in business that pleased Tyler enormously. One evening, as they worked together on Emma's math homework, she looked up at Tyler with serious eyes. "Daddy, I know you did things to hurt the people who hurt us." Tyler set down his pen, giving Emma his full attention. "Yes, I did." "Good," Emma said simply. "They deserved it." Tyler studied his daughter's face, seeing the same moral clarity that had driven his own actions. "Why do you think they deserved it?" Emma's answer was thoughtful and precise. "Because they didn't just hurt us once. They made choices every day to keep hurting us. Mommy chose her boyfriend over my safety. The doctor lady chose money over helping people. Uncle Kevin chose stealing over being honest. They all had chances to do the right thing, but they didn't." Tyler nodded, proud of Emma's reasoning. "And what do you think happens when people don't face consequences for hurting others?" "They keep hurting people," Emma replied without hesitation. "Like bullies at school. If nobody stops them, they just get worse." Tyler realized that Emma had internalized the most important lesson of their ordeal, that evil succeeded when good people failed to respond with appropriate force. His daughter would never be a victim because she understood that some fights were worth winning at any cost. 6 months later, Tyler received news that brought their story full circle. Valdez had been killed in prison by an inmate whose own daughter had been kidnapped years earlier. Tyler felt no sadness at the news, only a sense that the universe had finally balanced its scales. Tyler told Emma about Valdez's death that evening over dinner. Her reaction was characteristically direct. "I'm glad he's dead," she said matter-of-factly. "Now he can never hurt another kid." Tyler agreed. Some people forfeited their right to exist in civilized society through their actions. Valdez had been one of them. As Tyler tucked Emma into bed that night, She asked a question that showed how completely she understood their journey. "Daddy, if someone ever tries to hurt our family again, will you stop them?" Tyler's answer was immediate and absolute. "Always. No matter what it costs, no matter how long it takes. I will always protect you." Emma smiled and closed her eyes, secure in the knowledge that her father was a man who kept his promises. Tyler sat in his home office later that evening, reviewing business reports and planning the next phase of his company's expansion. The house was quiet, peaceful, and completely his. Emma was safe, his business was thriving, and his enemies had been utterly defeated. Tyler Brennan had learned that he was capable of systematic, ruthless revenge when his family was threatened. More importantly, he learned that he felt no guilt about exercising that capability. Some men built businesses. Some men built fortunes. Tyler Brennan had built something more valuable, an unshakable fortress around the one person who mattered most to him. And he would defend that fortress against any threat, no matter where it came from or what it cost to eliminate it. Chapter 9. Legacy of Steel. 5 years had passed since Emma's kidnapping, and the Brennan family had emerged stronger than ever. Emma, now 17, was preparing for her senior year of high school with plans to study business and engineering at college. She had grown into a formidable young woman who combined Tyler's strategic thinking with a moral clarity that impressed everyone who met her. Tyler's business had expanded nationally, with construction projects in 12 states. His reputation for delivering complex projects on time and under budget had made him one of the most sought-after contractors in the country. More importantly, his reputation for protecting what was his had made him a man no one crossed lightly. The final chapter of Tyler's revenge had been written 3 years earlier when Amanda, struggling with alcoholism and depression, had attempted to reconnect with Emma through social media. Emma's response had been swift and final. She blocked her biological mother on all platforms and informed Tyler of the contact attempt. Tyler's response was equally decisive. Through his lawyers, he'd sent Amanda a cease and desist order that made clear any further attempt to contact Emma would result in harassment charges. Amanda had moved to another state and hadn't been heard from since. Emma's perspective on the situation was clear and unwavering. During a father-daughter conversation about college plans, she'd addressed the topic directly. "I know some people think I should forgive her," Emma said as they reviewed application materials. "But forgiveness doesn't mean I have to let someone back into my life who proved they can't be trusted." Tyler nodded approvingly. "What matters is that you're making decisions based on your own judgment, not other people's expectations." Emma's moral framework had been shaped by the crucible of betrayal and justice she'd experienced as a child. She understood that loyalty was earned through actions, not promised through words. She'd learned to evaluate people based on what they did when it mattered, not what they claimed they would do. At school, Emma was known for her leadership and her unwillingness to tolerate bullying or dishonesty. She'd inherited Tyler's protective instincts and applied them to defending classmates who couldn't defend themselves. Teachers respected her integrity, and her peers sought her guidance on difficult decisions. Tyler's proudest moment came during Emma's junior year when she discovered that a popular student was cheating on college admission tests. Despite pressure from classmates to stay silent, Emma had reported the cheating to school administrators. "Everyone says I'm being harsh," Emma had told Tyler that evening. "They say it could ruin his college chances." Tyler's response reinforced the lesson he'd been teaching since her kidnapping. His choices already ruined his college chances. You just made sure there were consequences. The cheating student was expelled and lost his scholarship opportunities. Emma faced social pressure for her decision, but she never wavered. She understood that integrity required difficult choices and that enabling dishonesty was itself a form of betrayal. Tyler's business philosophy had been similarly influenced by their shared experience. He was known for paying employees well and promoting based on merit, but he was equally known for his zero-tolerance approach to dishonesty or disloyalty. Employees who violated his trust were terminated immediately and blacklisted throughout the industry. This reputation had attracted the highest quality workers and contractors, people who valued the security of working for a man whose word was absolute. Tyler's projects were completed by teams that functioned with military precision because everyone understood the standards expected. Frank Rodriguez, now Tyler's head of security and investigations, had become a trusted family friend. His continued vigilance ensured that no threats to the Brennan family went undetected. The network of information and influence Tyler had built during his revenge campaign had evolved into a comprehensive security apparatus. "You've created something unique," Frank observed during one of their regular security briefings. "Most wealthy families worry about external threats. You've eliminated the possibility of internal betrayal." Tyler nodded. The lesson of Amanda's betrayal had been permanent. Trust was a luxury he could no longer afford with anyone except Emma. His inner circle was small, carefully vetted, and continuously monitored. Loyalty was rewarded handsomely, but disloyalty was punished swiftly and completely. Emma's college applications reflected her intention to follow Tyler's path into business, but with her own focus on sustainable construction and environmental engineering. She wanted to build on Tyler's legacy while addressing the challenges of her generation. "I want to prove that being ethical and profitable aren't mutually exclusive," Emma explained as they discussed her career goals. "You taught me that reputation is everything in business. I want to build a reputation for solving problems that matter." Tyler was proud of Emma's vision, but he also ensured she understood the realities of the business world. During their weekend construction site visits, he taught her to read people as carefully as she read blueprints. "Most people will try to use your success for their own benefit," Tyler explained as they watched crews pouring concrete for a new hospital. "The key is identifying who deserves trust and who deserves distance." Emma had absorbed these lessons completely. She evaluated new acquaintances with the same systematic approach Tyler used for business deals. She was friendly but cautious, generous but not naive, trusting but never foolish. As Emma's 18th birthday approached, Tyler reflected on the journey they'd shared since that terrible night when she'd appeared on their doorstep as a 10-year-old refugee from her mother's betrayal. The trauma that could have destroyed them had instead forged them into an unbreakable team. Tyler's final act of revenge against those who had wronged them came on Emma's birthday itself. He presented her with a comprehensive trust fund that would ensure her financial independence for life, but the trust had specific conditions that reflected their shared values. The fund would only support Emma's endeavors if they met strict ethical standards. Any involvement with dishonest business practices, any betrayal of family loyalty, any action that compromised her integrity would result in immediate forfeiture of the trust. "I'm not worried about you violating these conditions," Tyler explained as Emma reviewed the documents. "But I want future generations to understand what the Brennan name represents." Emma smiled as she signed the papers. "Honor, loyalty, and consequences for those who violate both." Exactly. That evening, as they celebrated Emma's birthday with a small gathering of their closest friends and associates, Tyler watched his daughter interact with their guests. She was gracious but observant, engaging but careful, warm but never vulnerable. Emma had learned to protect herself without becoming cynical, to trust carefully without becoming paranoid, to forgive appropriately without becoming weak. She embodied the lessons Tyler had tried to teach through his actions during their darkest period. As the evening wound down and their guests departed, Tyler and Emma sat together on their back porch, looking out over the city Tyler's company had helped build. "Do you ever regret how we handled everything?" Emma asked, her question showing the maturity that impressed Tyler constantly. Tyler considered his answer carefully. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that you had to experience betrayal so young. But I don't regret our response to it." Emma nodded. "I used to wonder if we were too harsh. But then I think about all the kids who might have been hurt if we'd let them get away with it. Sometimes being kind to bad people means being cruel to innocent people." Tyler felt a deep satisfaction hearing Emma articulate the moral framework that had guided his own actions. She understood that mercy without justice was merely weakness, that forgiveness without consequences was enablement of further harm. "What will you do if someone betrays you in the future?" Tyler asked. Emma's answer was immediate and certain. "Exactly what you taught me. Investigate thoroughly, respond systematically, and never give them a second chance to hurt me or anyone I care about. Tyler smiled. His daughter had learned the most important lesson he could teach, that strength was not about avoiding